the Hart Trophy. This is given out to the league MVP. Austin Matthews won it last year on the strength of his 60-goal season, but he is the second choice. McDavid is the favorite, plus 250. Then it's Matthews 5-1, Draisaitl plus 850, Nathan McKinnon 12-1, Kirill Kaprizov 14-1, as is Cale Makar. And then you get to the 20s and 30s, and this is a market where it kind of is cyclical. We'll see. You'll see, like, Chris Pronger, I think, is the last defenseman to win it. That was a long time ago. We haven't had a goalie win it since Carey Price, I believe, in 2014. There's only been 4 since 1997. Dominic Hasek won twice in a row in 97, 98. So, and then Jose Theodore won in 2002. So Price is the only goalie to win between 2002 and now. But I do think a narrative started to develop last year around Shesterkin, where people were wondering, should we start considering goaltenders for this award more than we do? And I think there are 2 beneficiaries to that, both of whom we've already touched on a little bit. Ilya Sorokin on the Islanders, he's 8-1 to win the Vezina at most shops. If he does have a Vezina season, that means he's already beat out Shesterkin, he's beat out Vasilevsky, he's beat out Saros. So he's putting up great numbers. And if he does have that kind of season, does mean the Islanders will probably make the playoffs. We know that you most likely need to make the playoffs to be part of this, the voting for this award. So 125-1 out there on Sorokin, I think, is a better bet than the 8-1 on the Vezina. So what I would say is, if you're going to bet him to win the Vezina, just go ahead and take the risk on to win the Hart. And then the other guy is Thatcher Demko, 200-1. And I know that Shesterkin was lights out last season and still didn't win the award. He had a generational season, and that's a little discouraging for betting goalies in this market. However, I do think what he did was at least put goalies back on the map for it. So if we see McDavid or Matthews either get hurt or, just not have their usual up to theirs, because they've set the expectation for their seasons already. So, like, if they don't match it, people could just be down on them, just relatively speaking. So long shots for a reason. Goalies tend not to win the award. They tend not to even pop up on the ballot or the nominee list. So, but those are my 2 goalies that I like. I'll touch on another player there, but Nick, you have a couple, or you have a guy you like towards the top of the board.
Yeah, for this one, I'm seeing value with Cale Makar. I like him at 15-1. Those same narratives that you were talking about will work against him a little bit, but it was clear in the playoffs we saw he is right there with the very top players in the world. He won the Conn Smythe. He, in the head-to-head matchup with McDavid, it drew a lot of attention for how well he played in that series. And I think heading 1 year further into his true prime, like I touched on earlier, he could really pop off, and I think we could see him hang around in this race. So I think that number is just a little too long. I truly think he is one of the very best handful of players in the world this year. So I think 15-1 is just a little long for a guy who I really think is going to keep progressing. And if everything everyone knows about Cale Makar, no one says a bad word about him. His attitude is amazing. His work ethic is super good. So I'm not concerned he's the kind of guy who came into a cup win and he's going to have a hangover, entering the season, anything like that. He's going to be ready to go. And I really think he's going to be very, very dominant this season.
And there was a narrative kind of that popped up during the playoffs, which is, he's going to win the Conn Smythe. The Hart Trophy is not too far in the future for Makar. So he's already on the radar. He will be contending with, like, McKinnon on his own team. That is a little concerning, but I think if I had to pick someone near the top, it would be Makar as well. One skater I like, before I pass it to you, Pete, we touched on him, mentioned him in passing. Nikolai Ehlers, he's 300-1. He's going to play at the top of that lineup. He's going to play with Kyle Connor, who scores buckets of goals. So the top 6 is good enough where he's going to basically he already has like a floor of like 60 points. His ceiling, I think, could be like what Jonathan Huberdeau did last year, or Johnny Gaudreau. Like he's such a good facilitator, such a good mover, that I could see him just producing his way into the conversation. Whether he will win it or not, he's 300-1 for a reason, is a whole other story. But of the guys in the deep part of the board, I really like Ehlers, a huge payday, 300-1. What do you have for us, Pete?
Yeah, that line I talked about earlier with Ehlers, Scheifele, and Kyle Connor. I wouldn't be surprised to see if they all played together all year, like one or two of those guys have 100+ points. So I do think the ceiling's super high. Kyle Connor was up in the 90s last year. He was second in even strength goals behind Matthews. So, that's another guy to consider for Rocket Richard. It's another guy to consider if Winnipeg has a bounce back. Connor Hellebuck is another guy that puts that team on his shoulders. But again, I think the Jets, generally speaking, get overlooked from an awards standpoint for some reason, regardless of how they finish. So they have a ton of valuable players, but I don't know that they're going to definitely make that happen. We'll see. I think the Makar thing is real. He has 95 to 100 point capability. If Cale Makar were to go out there and score 100 points as a defenseman, none of us would be surprised, and he would probably become the front runner, right, in the process of that happening. So I think you guys are onto something with that for sure. And then don't forget about like Sidney Crosby. I think he continues to will the Penguins. He was on a great point pace last year. He's another guy that could venture up into the hundreds very, very easily. He's done it a bunch of times in his career. So and I feel like the Penguins are still in that win now mentality, still very strong, picking them to make the playoffs this year. So, and then Kirill Kaprizov is another guy, like he's a one-man show, I feel like, for the Wild. So if he scores 100+ points again and takes another big step forward from last year, taking a big step forward from his rookie season, his trajectory super high. And then keep an eye on like the some of the big off-season movers. Jonathan Huberdeau, with all the losses in Calgary with Gaudreau and Tkachuk. If Huberdeau goes in there and replicates what he did in Florida somehow, he could be like the savior. He saving the franchise by signing on with them for 8 years probably. So that's a cool storyline. Same with Johnny Hockey. If the Jackets make the playoffs, I feel like Johnny Hockey will be among the Hart Trophy contenders.
Yeah, the Johnny Hockey odds are kind of like the Coach of the Year odds, correlated to whether or not the Jackets make the playoffs.